In 1775, Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet stating that the freedoms of men can only be maintained by limiting the power of government. The pamphlet was called Common Sense, and today it still is Common Sense.
I'm April Giarrusso.
I'm Mark Zaccaria. This is Common Sense. Welcome back. In this week's broadcast, we will probe the fallout from the railroading of toll gantries onto an unwilling electorate. We'll explore some of the similarly odorous efforts being made by legislative leadership to scuttle any attempts to bring their behavior back under the purview of the State Ethics Commission. We may even find something creepy lurking in a closet. As usual, State Representative Patricia Morgan will come up shortly, because everyone knows she does not like being told she's out of order. She will conduct another of her signature in-depth interviews. With 4 full segments to dig into details, there is no better coverage of her topics than you'll see right here. This week, Pat talks with RIGOP Chairman Brandon Bell about the party's plan to respond to your legislators' votes on tolls in this fall's election. Between those segments, April and I will pop back in to administer a dose of satire as we ask the question, are you kidding me? Batting cleanup, as usual, is commentator Jeff Richard. This first full week of spring training, Jeff will devote his thoughts to licensing run amok. To lead off this week's edition of Common Sense, we will go to some analysis of the top news stories impacting Rhode Islanders today. April?
Thanks, Mark. The hard-working, tax-paying men and women of Rhode Island are still reeling this week from the raw display of dictatorial power put on by the leadership of the General Assembly. Last week, they forcibly passed their truck tolling program despite 2-to-1 opposition. Did you think your legislators worked for you, or at least for the good of the majority of people? Think again. Insiders in the executive offices, the speaker chambers, and the Senate saw an income opportunity, and they took it. It is plain to see that they weren't too guilty about sticking you with the bill. They didn't seem too bothered by the Rhode Island Constitution either. Article 6, Section 16 of the founding document prohibits the General Assembly from authorizing any debt in excess of $50,000 without the expressed approval of the voters in referendum. Hey, they got away clean with the $75 million for 38 studios, so they can't be anticipating much of a problem borrowing $300 million without telling mom and dad this time. In point of fact, our political leaders don't give a fig about what we think about anything. They certainly fear no retribution at the polls this November. If the last 7 or 8 decades of electoral history are any indication, they'll get away with it again this time. We can only hope that this is finally the time Rhode Islanders will get mad enough to do something about it. And happily, there may be some early signs that will be the case this go-around. The Stop Tolls movement, which formed last fall to lobby against truck tolling, is now formalizing itself into a political action committee whose charter is to turn out of office any legislator who voted for this dog and pony show. They'll be collecting money to do just that. There's talk in Republican circles that RNC National Committee man Steve Frias will step up to challenge Representative Nick Mattiello for the House District 15 seat. Frias, a well-known attorney and popular historian in Cranston, has a good chance of mounting a successful challenge, especially if the mood of the electorate has turned on the Speaker. Wouldn't that shake things up on Smith Hill? In summary, I'd say we have not seen the last of the truck tolling controversy, and Mark, you and I will have plenty more news to analyze on this matter as the year unfolds.
I have to agree with that assessment, April. Thanks. Speaking of leadership having it their way, we saw another interesting development in the Senate on the same day as the House vote on tolls. Senator James Sheehan, a Democrat from North Kingstown, was outed by the Senate President for having sent her a letter asking for confirmation of an instruction she'd given the Dem caucus at their meeting on the 30th of January. Put that way, it doesn't sound like too great a sin. The problem was Senate President Teresa Paiva-Weed had given verbal instructions to her troops not to submit or vote for any legislation to amend the state constitution to reassert Ethics Commission authority over legislators. Say what? Actually, it gets better than even that. According to the leaked letter from Senator Sheehan, the boss had explained that Speaker Mattiello told her that any such legislation reaching the House would die of starvation, and the senators could expect similar fates for a punitive number of additional bills of interest to their Democrat colleagues. Take that, plebes. Should be no surprise that Senator Sheehan pushed back on that dictum. To his credit, he has submitted a Senate bill to fix that very problem in each of the last few sessions. In fact, in 2014, his measure passed the Senate and was sent on to an unresponsive House. Presumably, Paiva Weed's admonishment to her team stemmed from some preemptive strike made at the beginning of this session by Speaker Mattiello. So, class, the release of this ostensibly private letter tells us that Sister Teresa thinks little Jimmy Sheehan has been bad and must sit in the corner until further notice. The other important takeaway here is that the Speaker runs the whole State House, and he does so with an iron hand. That might not actually be so bad if he was running it on our behalf. April?
Thanks, Mark. It seems like the boogeyman is always poised to jump out of the closet and devour unsuspecting Rhode Islanders. So it was again this week. U.S. Senator Jack Reed proudly announced the appropriation of $12.9 million in HUD grants to cities and towns here for support of public housing. 25 Ocean State municipalities will receive proceeds from this latest pot of federal money. The Senator's office released dollar details for each of the lucky winners, but of course, with HUD money, there are always strings attached. That part didn't get much ink in the otherwise breathless press release. We all should be reminded that HUD money comes with a requirement to produce an analysis of impediments document. This would detail, by census block, the obstacles the recipient recognizes to implementation of the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Rule, or AFFH. By the way, a census block is a pretty small geographical subset of the average town. In rural areas, many census blocks have 0 inhabitants, whereas an urban apartment complex could be one census block with a population of several hundred. In other words, there's a lot of paperwork owed when you get this cash. There's another catch. Grant recipients must also produce a plan to remedy all impediments identified. It's all laid out in 24 CFR 570.487B. Now, HUD goes to great pains to assert that it has no punitive reaction if none of these reportings get done. In practice, it doesn't have to. What's been happening recently is that advocacy groups or developers have been bringing suit in federal court against municipalities for not complying with AFFH requirements. That would be requirements they agreed to comply with when they took the HUD cash. In the Northeast, that's already happened in Westchester County, New York, and Fairfield County, Connecticut. Federal judges have upheld the standing of these aggrieved third parties, and the legal action is quickly becoming a path to a sudden and lucrative settlement for the likes of the ACLU. So enjoy your HUD money, Rhode Island, but if the boogeyman does jump out of the closet someday, don't say I didn't warn you. Mark?
Scary. Now, let's try to lighten things up a little before we get started with the first part of this week's in-depth interview. Won't somebody please ask the question, are you kidding me? Legislators are always being accused of creating new laws just because the General Assembly is in session, rather than because they are needed. In fact, lawmakers are frequently charged with institutionalizing the obvious. I am not kidding you. Here's one example. Senate Bill 2178 is an act regarding health and safety sponsored by Senators Golden, Ruggiero, Goodwin, Felag, and Sosnowski. If passed into law, it will require that all educational institutions within the state recycle food waste from their cafeterias. Don't you think they're doing that already? Certainly every high school wag who's ever made a crack about the origin of the mystery meat being served for lunch believes they are. And what are the penalty for failure to adequately do so? Will the lunch lady be sentenced to 90 days of eating her own cooking? What if an accused demands a jury trial? Will cafeteria takeout be brought in as Exhibit A? And if so, will that conflict with laws already on the books which prohibit the consumption of food and drink in the courtroom? Oh, this could take decades to adjudicate. School lunch programs, like all other businesses that have cost accounting processes, are already under an economic mandate to minimize their costs. If that means capturing an additional revenue stream from recycling food wastes, they're already doing it. Do the sponsors of this bill want it put in force even if the mandated recycling grossly increases costs and puts the enterprise even farther underwater? Do we live in Rhode Island? Or is this actually Regulation Nation? Are you kidding me?
On February 4th, the Rhode Island House Finance Committee held a hearing on Roadworks Rhode Island, the governor's proposed bill, since signed into law, to fix Rhode Island's roads and bridges. In the following clip, you will see Chairman of the House Finance Committee, Representative Ray Gallison, end the meeting at 11 p.m. while Representative Morgan was asking the Director of Rhode Island Department of Transportation questions. Let's listen in.
Given the hour, the late hour, I think we're going to suspend for tonight, and we'll probably have to come back. I'm not sure when, but we probably have to. But
okay, I was promised that I would get the questions, and there really are things that I have.
I understand. Why don't you do this? I can get your answers to the questions if you want to put them in writing to us, and we can certainly.
No, I'd rather ask them personally. I like that format better.
Thank you, and that concludes tonight's hearing.
In the next clip, we see the House Finance Committee after it reconvenes. What you see is the first opportunity for Representative Patricia Morgan to speak. Let's listen in.
Questions. Representative Morgan?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Sharon, did you get any of the other documents that we had requested?
This is
I
on,
know you sent.
excuse me, Representative, we are here on the substitute A. You have a question on the substitute A?
I asked for
Do you have a
documents,
question
and
on
I
the
wasn't
substitute
provided
A?
all the documents.
You're out of order.
I am not out of order. We're here.
please-
We're here to
Representative
find
Morgan-
the truth, to
Representative
find
Morgan,
all
we
of
are
the
here on the
information that is
substitute.
related to this
Representative
bill,
Morgan,
sub A
please.
or regular bill.
Representative Morgan, you are out of order.
I am not out of order.
Representative Morgan, I'll ask that your microphone be shut off. You are out of order. We're here on the substitute A. Do you have a question on the substitute A, yes or no?
The people of my district
Do you have a
paid for this
question on the
microphone,
substitute A, yes
and
or
I
no?
have a right to ask questions.
On the substitute A, you've had plenty of time in the hearing to ask questions.
No, I
You've gotten
didn't.
from-
You cut me off.
Representative Morgan,
I
we
was
were
not
here till
able to
midnight.
finish my
Representative
questioning, and I
Morgan,
have brought that to your
if you're gonna
attention,
shout
as
over
well
me, if
as
you're gonna talk
the
over
fact
me,
that
then
many
would you
documents
please
are
shut your
missing.
microphone off?
Good. Because
Representative
I
Riley?
have a right to all of the information.
Representative Riley, you're out of order, Representative Morgan.
I am not.
You are out of order.
What, because you would rather we vote with
Representative
incomplete
Morgan,
information?
you are out of
Is that
order.
it? You have the power?
Representative
so we
Riley,
can,
you have a
we're
question.
just
Please
supposed
ask your question.
to vote like blind mice?
You must have gotten a copy of that email.
Okay, thank you.
We did not receive all of the information that we
Representative
requested.
Morgan, you're out of order. Representative
I know.
Cannavale?
You can keep saying that, but the truth of the matter is I am not, because I am
409 substitute A.
The motion
I am
by-
entitled
there's a-
to the information.
Please, Representative Morgan.
I am entitled to
You
finish
have
my
the information.
questioning of the director.
You have the information. There's a motion made by Representative Cannavale and seconded by Representative Norton, Representative Slater, Representative Serpa, Representative Barrows.
When someone goes off script in the State House, this is how they are treated. Representative Morgan had the right to ask any and all questions she wanted to, and Representative Gallison cut her off while acknowledging she wasn't finished. He then does not allow her to continue. We need to remember this in November at the ballot box.
Welcome to Common Sense Rhode Island. This is the program where we try to make sense out of the policies that affect your life and come up with common sense solutions. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and today we have with us the chairman of the Republican Party, Brandon Bell.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Long week.
It's been a long week, yes. All right, so the toll bill. It passed.
Well, now we move on to replace the legislators that voted for it and repeal the bill.
Yeah.
That's the goal, replace and repeal.
You know, and I think that's the only way we have to change the people in the building if we're going to change the policies that they're voting through. You saw what was happening up there over the last, actually, it was only 2 weeks from the time that bill came to the House, got the hearing, got voted out, and was passed, and now signed. It was signed within minutes.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything so fast. And it's, to me, it's just an affront, quite frankly, to all of the people out there who were being diligent about writing the emails and making the phone calls and lifting up their voices and saying, we don't want this. I don't know, you must have heard from a lot of folks.
A lot of people. I mean, 77 legislators between the House and the Senate just didn't listen. And I have not yet spoken to someone who's for someone outside the legislature who's for the plan. I'm not even convinced that some of the people that voted for it are for it. And it really is. It's a sad day, a sad week, I should say. We know that the massive $1.2 billion rollout back in June or May was sloppy. It was a horrible piece of legislation. What we don't know is what happened between then and now.
That's all behind closed doors,
Absolutely.
all insiders eating off the people of Rhode Island. I've studied. I studied the toll issue. I studied the budget.
Yeah.
And, it's just indicative of what happens up there. We had the hearing. I don't know if our listener or of our viewers actually saw this, but we had a hearing, and Director Alviti was there to answer our questions. Every other person on the Finance Committee was able to ask their questions in full. I consider myself an expert on it. I'll be honest with you, I do, because I have really spent the time, months and months, developing an alternative so that we wouldn't have to have tolls. We honestly, it's 0.5% of our budget is what we need. 0.5%.
Mm-hmm.
No damage from tolls, nothing out of social services, nothing out of vital services, 0.5% of wasteful programs. Well, I won't go on. Our viewers have seen that. But it's my turn to ask questions. I had 11 topics that I wanted to explore with the director. And he was struggling. The first 4, he was struggling. And I know he was saying things that they would rather people not know. Mm-hmm. That they intended it to be a perpetual. That he has $1 billion of future projects lined up. And his eyes are almost glinting with, oh, look at the money I'm going to get to spend. They cut me off.
What they did was absolutely despicable. Despicable is, I can't even think of, there are too many words to describe it. It's interesting. This is like reverse transparency. They knew exactly what you were doing, Rep. Morgan. They knew what you were doing.
It's trying to get answers out there for the people of Rhode Island.
That's right. And for months, the transparency was from you and the group that you formed, the Republican Policy Group. And you were showing exactly how we can reallocate, which a recent Hassenfeld poll had 60% favoring reallocation. Those are pretty good polls done by a Democratic pollster.
Yep.
And you're talking about less than 1% of a $9 billion budget. What makes this even worse, half of 1%, and what makes it even worse from my perspective, and I'm not on the State House floor, is listening to Governor Raimondo only 2 weeks earlier. I think the day the bill was presented, if I'm not mistaken, in her State of the Budget address, State of the State, talking about increasing spending by 3.5%. So all of that money, so now $150 million of spending she's introducing, which is higher than the growth, the inflation rate. It's and then not being able to pay for these tolls.
Well, and here's the other thing: she's spending another $150 million. She's putting another $250 million in general obligation bonds out there. And over here is another $50 million price tag for tolls.
Yeah.
So this is a huge spending budget. Huge. We had the money inside the budget. But worse than that, when you're trying to ask the questions, I finally had the guy in public. He had to answer my questions, and they cut me off.
And that was planned.
And I protested.
And that was planned. There's no doubt in my mind that was planned, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist. And I think anybody who watched that, and I hope it's replayed over and over and over again, you were shut down. And they had a plan. They were going to let you ask a couple questions, and when you got to a certain point,
every other rep got to ask questions in full, and that's how it's supposed to be.
Absolutely.
And I had questions, and they were good questions.
Well, and I thought Director Alviti was extremely arrogant about the way in which he was answering the questions.
You think?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think he's our employee, not the other way around.
He works for us.
Yeah.
He works for us, and he's showing, again, I know he's new there, but he's already shown the level of arrogance that the administration has. He's using that and for everyone to see. And I saw the way that the chairman of that finance committee not only shut you down, but was helping Representative or Director Alviti answer certain questions, which I thought was absolutely a complete distraction, and it was if I was in that room, I don't think I would have been able to contain myself. So I just thank you so much for fighting for all of us.
I did. I continued it too. I mean, there was a whole list of documents, and the diversion maps are one of them. So maybe we can put them on your website so people
Sure.
can see the diversion maps, because it shows where trucks will go on our state roads and our local roads to avoid paying tolls.
That's right.
And the people of those communities need to know just how desperate it is. But all these documents, and again, I kept pressing them and saying, we need the documents, we need the knowledge.
Nothing.
They don't want us to have it.
Nothing.
I'm a legislator. Now this is my 6th year.
Yeah.
Thank you, people. Never before, under Governor Chafee, did I ever have to put in a formal access to public records request. Never before. Whenever I needed something from the administration, it was an email, it was a phone call. Whether they liked it or not, they gave it to me. I have to put in official APRA, they're called APRA requests now, to get documents. I tried with Gina Raimondo's administration early, and with DOT to get some information from them on change orders. Took them 9 weeks, several emails, many phone calls, to get a list that was not satisfying, let's put it that way.
If I recall, there was a map from 1882 with horse and buggies. Something to that. Yeah.
So now, before I do anything, it's just a straight access to public records document, because you don't get anything out of this administration. The lack of transparency, the lack of real sense of, we're here serving the public. We're their employees. We work for them. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, there's a level of arrogance, the stonewalling that's occurred over and over and over again with different issues. It's
and in this
mind-boggling.
one, it's just the cost of this to our economy is damaging. It's detrimental to everybody.
It's going to kill jobs.
Yeah.
It'll kill jobs. And we've called her now the Ocean State Job Killer, and there's 77 new members to that squad.
All right, on that solemn note, we're going to stop. We'll be right back.
There is awesome power in the dark art of concocting legislation. Members of the General Assembly get to define the world as it ought to be. In that fantasy, they get to craft codes of conduct that are unassailable, at least in the ivory tower up on Smith Hill. What happens when the real world intrudes? Are you kidding me? The imaginary world is shattered, that's what. And it may be about to happen again. Senate Bill 2220 was recently introduced. Its sponsors are Senators Lombardi, Archambault, Coyne, Ruggiero, Lynch, and Prada. Together, these renowned computer scientists have teamed up to create nothing less than the definition of cyberstalking. Their delineation, less than 200 words in length, defines cyberstalking as causing harassment by communication via computer or by knowingly permitting 2 or more such communications by others. Do you know what would have happened to me if I tried to use that line on my cybersecurity professor in grad school? Never mind. By that definition, the Secretary of State is guilty of cyberstalking every time she issues a list of registered voters to a political party she knows darn well means to contact those folks. One person's debate on issues is another person's harassment. So these senators can't actually tell you what cyberstalking is, but they truly feel they'll know it when they see it. My advice? Stick to the industry standards when it comes to technical matters. That will leave you more time for crafting the kind of legislation you're actually good at. Wait guys, remind me, what kind of legislation is that again? Are you kidding me?
Welcome back. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and my guest today is Brandon Bell, who's the chairman of the Republican Party here in Rhode Island.
Good morning.
Yes, I'm glad. Well, let's finish. Let's go on. This is a jobs killer. It's done though. It's been passed in both chambers of the General Assembly and was signed by the governor, all in one fell swoop. Mm-hmm. And that was despite a lot of people calling, emailing, being engaged, saying, please don't do this because it's a job killer.
It's a job killer. It's
right?
a job killer. It's a new tax. once the government creates a revenue source, it just expands. We know that from history. At some point in time, if we don't do something about this, we're going to see cars being tolled. Look, there's nothing.
There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that it will end to all vehicles being tolled.
Yeah.
As I said on the floor of the House, there are 3 significant constitutional challenges to the bill we just passed. I believe it's unconstitutional. The American Trucking Association thinks it's unconstitutional. And that is that you can't discriminate against different classes of trucks. And it does.
Yeah.
And I asked for those legal opinions. Another transparency issue, I asked for the legal opinions because they said, oh no, we're on firm ground. Well, the ATA, the American Trucking Association, thinks they're on firm ground too, and they've got a building full of lawyers, I'm sure. In fact, there's a precedent from Pennsylvania that says capping the truck toll is unconstitutional. So there's already been a judicial ruling that it's unconstitutional. So when the first truck is finally tolled, when we have spent all this money, put up the gantries, then they're going to come back to us and say, oh, geez, sorry, but it is unconstitutional, so now we're going to have to toll everybody.
Well, costly litigation is definitely a reason in and of itself to have legal opinions when you're being threatened with costly legal litigation. We already know that the American truckers, through the Rhode Island Truckers Association and the American Truckers Association, who's called into radio shows and has talked to the press.
I talked to him at the State House.
Has said, look, this is absolutely going to go into litigation. So for you to ask through APRA, you shouldn't even have to use APRA, to actually get those legal opinions, it's something that we pay for. We pay for the lawyers to write these legal opinions. And what blows my mind is I believe this year the State House budget that is at least being recommended for the next fiscal year is almost $45 million. Well, a lot of that money goes to State House aides, policy people, lawyers. Why is it that we cannot get our hands on those legal opinions? If they say we are not going to face litigation, then tell us why. You work for us.
Well, we are. We are going to go into litigation. And if we lose every car, every motorcycle, every pickup truck, every truck pulling a boat, everybody is going to be told.
Yeah.
And it is a $45 million tax. One way or the other, we're paying it. And I think the people got that loud and clear. And this legislature just ignored them. So they're mad now. They should be. They should be mad. They should be discouraged that when they ask their government to work in their best interests, it doesn't. And they're the best arbiters of whether it's in their best interests or not.
That's right.
To me, this legislation is about special interests. By the governor's own studies, 2,500 permanent full-time jobs will be destroyed by this. And that is conservative. And that's across all kinds of industries. It's not just the trucking industry, it's manufacturing. It's all kinds of small businesses will feel the brunt of this. Even franchisees like Dunkin' Donuts and the drugstore, they are going to be cutting back to pay for these tolls.
And it's going to be passed on to the consumers. And if you look back at these the laborers and the people that are going to fix our highways, they're going to get the work.
They would get it
anyway.
anyway.
Getting the work anyway.
It could have been a win-win. We could have kept this 2,500 jobs and added
6,000 or however many jobs. We're not creating.
And that was one of the questions I wanted to talk to Director Alviti, because my understanding is it's not really 6,000 permanent jobs. He talks about it as being job years. So they took the total number of hours and they divided it by 2,000. But you then count the same person in the first year, and the second year, and the third year, and the fourth year.
So what you just did was you just showed me another example of how little the public knows, including myself.
It's
and I study this
years.
issue. It's job years, right? So I'm thinking 6,000 people would be put to work immediately.
No.
And that's probably what the average person thinks.
We don't have that many construction workers.
And how many bridges could you fix at the same time?
Right. So if a guy works from May until September or November, and he takes, the winter off because it's cold, well, that's 1 year, one job. Then he comes back, two jobs. Then he comes back, 3 jobs, right?
Unbelievable.
So all right. Okay, so people are angry. What do?
We need to have a large-scale firing at the State House. We need to send a message that the people were not listening to.
So not repeal and replace? Replace
and
repeal.
We need the right people at the State House. We need the largest turnaround since World War II or before in this state. We need to change what's going on up at the state. I think electing Republicans to the State House, people, again, not to make this just a partisan issue, but that's my job, because I'm pretty partisan, but I would say that I don't know of a Republican or a normal individual who would actually vote for something like this. So you need to listen to your constituents. You do not you don't control the state. The arrogance that's up at the Speaker's rostrum, the arrogance in the governor's seat, we need to send a message to them, and it starts at the top. We need to take the Speaker out.
Well, we just need to change, my opinion, the one-party dominance that's at the State House, because I know, Representative Marcello is on one side of Speaker Mattiello's district, and he got a lot of emails. He said not one. He had 2 public meetings. Not one person did he find that was in favor of tolls. I'm on the other side of Speaker Mattiello's district. I got tons of emails and phone calls. Not one person contacted me in favor of tolls. He said his district, everybody in District 15, which is Western Cranston, is in favor of tolls.
No, they're not.
It's not believable.
They're not. It's not only not believable. I know that some doors were knocked on, and I could tell you that it was almost unanimously against the tolls in District 15. So it's going to take a massive effort, not just in District 15, but throughout the state, to...
And it's not just replacing him. The people who elected him and who listened to him.
Yeah. His leadership team is beholden to him, and for some reason he rules the day, and we need to change that. We need to change the way things are done up at the State House.
Change the mix-up. Make it 50-50. Give us independence. But somebody who will come in there and really work on behalf of citizens instead of on behalf of the Speaker.
That's right.
And there's the issue. All those reps, they were listening to him instead of to the people who were calling them and emailing them.
That's right, and that was very evident in the floor debate on both the House side and the Senate side, where there were certain reps and senators who actually had the nerve to say, in my view, they had a big nerve to say, well, I got 74% of the vote last time around. Maybe I'll lose a couple percentage points this time.
They got to lose 55%.
That's right.
Yeah.
And guess what? It only takes 50.00001. That's right.
Okay, and we'll talk about that when we come back.
We all know about the kind of pressure that is put on legislators up on Smith Hill when their leaders really, really want them to vote for a certain measure. Now the votes on truck tolls are all counted, and that stinker is enacted law. So it's time for many who submitted to the pressure to start looking anywhere else to try and frame an excuse for doing what they did. Are you kidding me? Wait, would I kid you? Here's a case in point. Mia Ackerman is a Democrat who represents District 45 in the Rhode Island House. That district covers parts of Cumberland and Lincoln. She went along to get along with the Speaker. But then Rep. Ackerman immediately began texting constituents that she only did so because she feared intimidation from the Rhode Island Department of Transportation. Playing the victim card. Of course. Wait. Anyone would cower in fear if Mr. Alviti and his gang of bloodthirsty pirates were pillaging the countryside in search of them. Sorry, ma'am. The way I've always heard it, it's the bureaucrats who live in fear of the elected officials on the rampage. And in this case, it appears that the elected official on the rampage is Nicholas Mattiello, not Peter Alviti. Nice try, but the skull and crossbones is not the new RIDOT logo. That heraldry today adorns the entrance to the speaker's chambers. So, find another hole to hide in, lassie. Are you kidding me?
Welcome back. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and this gentleman beside me is Brandon Bell, Chairman of the Rhode Island Republican Party.
Hello again.
So let's continue our conversation. People are feeling pretty discouraged now because their government doesn't listen to them. I think new people need to be put in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, in the state Senate. I know there's a lot of objections that you must hear them all the time of, oh, well, I want to help, but I don't have the time, right? Let me explain to the folks what it entails. We meet from January, first week in January, until about the middle of June usually. It's roughly 60 days a year that we go in because we only meet on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and all the school vacation weeks we take off as well. So it's about 60 days a year. You have to be there at 4 o'clock on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and you can always be home for supper, except for maybe 3 or 4 days. And those 3 or 4 days, well, we just had one when we voted on the tolling proposal. That's fairly unusual. But it's at the end in June when we do the budget and the last days of the session when all kinds of garbage legislation comes out. They often buy votes for the budget by promising a rep that they'll pass one of their wonderful bills, and they're usually horrible bills. That's why they're not passed out in the open.
Mm-hmm. And I think last year ended with a chicken coop bill that they couldn't agree on.
The chicken coop bill. Yes. At any rate, it's really that. From 4 o'clock in the early months, because we're just handing in bills and stuff, you can be home by 5:30. Sometimes you'll get on a committee. I'm on the finance committee. That meets every night. And if you're on the finance committee, you may not get home until 9 o'clock, but you don't have to be on the finance committee. There are other committees to serve on. They generally meet once a week. Some, like the small business committee, meets 3 or 4 times a year. So it's not that heavy a load time-wise. Like I said, if you want to be home for supper, you can be home for supper every night, except for maybe a handful of nights. So it is doable. And I'm making a plea to business owners out there. I know you're busy running your companies, and I don't expect business owners necessarily to run, because their most important thing is keeping their business strong and their employees employed. But maybe you have employees that you know that are really interested in politics and you think have just a really good head on their shoulders and that they would make good and ethical choices for Rhode Island. Think about letting them go, because you're going to let them go for about 90 hours a year, and you'll get so much better government for it. Right now, our legislature is full of lawyers. No, just, I'm not being mean here. Municipal workers, retired municipal workers, they're entitled to their opinion, and I'm not saying that they're not, but they have a different way of looking at legislation than a business owner would. And one thing Rhode Island needs more than anything else is we need a vibrant business community, because that's where we'll get our jobs. I look at the minimum wage stuff that goes, I want people to make a living wage. I know you do too.
Of course.
But I want them to make it because there's so many jobs out there that they can pick and choose which ones they want to be in. And they can get raises, and they can get promotions, and they can move on to that next job that has more to it. I don't want them getting minimum wage for their whole lives. So what we need are people who understand business and look at it as a partner to Rhode Island. So that's it. I mean, it's really about 90 hours I'm pontificating, but are you shaking your head up and down?
I'm shaking my head up and down, absolutely. Look, what do we need here? We all care. What do we care about? We care about earned success through hard work. And part of that is being involved in your government. And just like Rep. Morgan is saying, I encourage people. Our recruitment effort at the Rhode Island GOP has been going on for some time now. We're not starting our recruitment effort first in February for the last 3 days in June, when one must declare for the office, which is the elections, of course, are in November. All 113 seats are up in November. So what does it take? It takes confidence, it takes preparation, it takes some courage and commitment. We just saw an excellent candidate in Senate District 11. It was a special election he showed all those things. He ran against a 100% name identification against a guy who lives in a community that comprises 80% of the district, and our candidate, John Pagliarini, lived outside the district. He worked his tail off. We helped him. He got help from other sources. We got out the vote, which is a huge part of what we need to do, GOTV, as it's referred to, and he won. He won, and he won resoundingly. So
we want to replicate that.
We want to replicate that.
He was on the right side, though. People,
right.
It was his message and what he was going to stand for. And yep, we're Republicans, and somehow in Rhode Island, that's a dirty word. It's not. Right? It's a philosophy, a different philosophy, and I think nowadays it's the philosophy that we're here for the little guy.
That's right.
I work all the time trying to help the average family in my district. I'm not there for the insiders. So stop. Your hand doesn't fall off if you vote for a Republican.
That's right. That's right. And
you'll get better government.
And your hands can be in your pockets versus their hands being in your pockets if you vote for Republicans, because we do care about the middle class. And it's just such a misconception that the Republican Party is full of old white men. It's just not. It's just not that way.
And we're not fighting the party of the rich either.
That's right.
Honestly, we're there, really struggling for just everybody in our districts to make sure they get a fair shake here.
Absolutely. So I just want to point out to you that the RIGOP can offer a lot of different options, or a lot of different helping hands to run for office.
Okay, so all right, so we've just made the pitch to everybody. Think about it.
Absolutely.
Think about being a candidate. We'll help you. How do they contact you if they're thinking about it?
So for starters, go to www.ri.gop, and there's a whole a section there about how to run for office. How can we help you?
So that's .gop, not .com or
Not
.org.
.com. The domain name is .gop. So it's ri.gop. There's phone numbers in there. There's ways in which you can contact us and tell us what offices you're interested in. We are going to be starting very shortly here campaign education classes to teach people some very basic
I want to
things.
say they can contact me too, or any
Absolutely.
of the Republicans in the State House, and that's easy. You go to the RI Legislator website, you find us, you email us, and we'll get back to you as well.
That's right. There's many different ways to do that, and so we are going to help people find.
Where are you located?
We are located. Our offices are located. We have great headquarters at 1800 Post Road on Airport Plaza, and it's Suite 17. It's right by the old Staples. That's right next door to there, and that's where
Not
the
the
campaign
old
education.
Benny's?
Not the old Benny's. It's another business closed. It's a place in which we are going to be offering high-tech means to teach people how to run for office. One of the things that's really exciting this year is that the RNC data center, which the National Party spent $25 million updating, we're going to have walk applications so people can actually write on their phones or their tablets.
We'll talk about that in a minute, but now you know how to get in touch with us if you're
That's right.
interested. Even if you're just interested in volunteering, get in touch.
732-8282 is the phone number if you want to call.
732-8282. We'll be right back.
You've heard from us before on the bureaucratic mess that was the Rhode Island Department of Children, Youth, and Families during the Link Chafee administration. You've heard that enormous amounts of money were wasted on organizations representing tiny fractions of the population. But they were advocacy groups that had the foresight to hire very connected lobbyists. When you hear some of the audited numbers, though, I think I'll hear you say, "Are you kidding me?" Last week, the State Auditors General published the results of his review of the DCYF relationship with the Center for Southeast Asians. That's a group which represents the interests of Rhode Island's Cambodian, Hmong, Lao, and Vietnamese communities. Together, these groups account for a little over 1% of the Ocean State's total population. With the help of lobbyist Bill Fisher's connections, however, the center was able to score $1.7 million in direct grants, mostly from DCYF. When Auditor General Dennis Hoyle was brought in after the change of administration, he found that the Center for Southeast Asians had failed to spend more than half of the grant money within the prescribed time frame. Apparently, the organization was just too small to efficiently cycle that much cash, so the Raimondo team wanted to get it all back. After a protracted mating dance, however, they settled for a bit over $300,000. So in the end, well over $1 million taxpayer dollars disappeared, and there's no proof that any of it went toward any material assistance for the small demographic for which it was intended. But you can bet that a good number of insiders got theirs. Have I mentioned that I gotta believe there are enterprises which government just cannot manage well? As long as we continue to accept this kind of sloppiness, there will continue to be a scandalette like this, one around every corner, and all we'll be able to do about it is ask, are you kidding me?
Welcome back. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and this is Brandon Bell, who is the state chairman of the Rhode Island Republican Party. And we just told you that we want you, right? We want you to be candidates. We want volunteers. We want good government in Rhode Island, and the only way we're going to get there is if you step up and help us. Okay, so let's talk about volunteering, right? We need candidates, and hopefully you guys will get up out of your chair and say, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. But we also need volunteers, people who may not want to be a candidate, but who really want to help. What kinds of things do volunteers do?
Wow, there's so many things that volunteers can do, between making phone calls, helping with sign placement, knocking on doors. It's endless, because all hands need to be on deck to help people in your district or outside your district, wherever you're helping, run for office.
Yeah, let me tell you, I always really like my volunteers, even somebody to walk door to door with me and kind of keep track.
Absolutely.
Because it's lonely out there when you do it all by yourself. So if you have somebody with you, it's just helpful. But you'll find somebody who says, sure, put a sign up in my yard. Well, you need people who will just kind of go around every couple of days and make sure that they haven't been stolen, quite frankly, and put a new one up. People to go and collect your literature and stuff at the printer, so you don't have to do it. That's kind of a campaign manager, and I'd love to have a campaign manager school to help people understand how you have the fundraisers, you account for the money, you just you'd help take that burden off the candidate. Because the candidate's only job is to walk door to door with his good message,
or her.
Well, I should have said her, he or she, to meet people.
That's right.
I walk my district 3 times when I run, because I want to meet everybody. Mm-hmm. And if I have to stop and do the sign placements and go and run for the literature and stuff, it takes that time away from me. So volunteers are really necessary, and they're critical. We need you.
And we can help find those volunteers for you. Besides people in your community and your neighbors, the people at your church.
We'll hook them up.
Well, we connect those dots together. Because, your job is to make the connection, the personal connection with the voters. And it's not as hard as it sounds.
It isn't.
Yeah, because you're not walking in Westerly if you live in Woonsocket. You a rep district and a senate district are only a certain size. So there's, between mailers and walking and making a hand-to-hand contact, retail politics, it's completely doable, and it's actually a lot of fun. And the part that Rep. Morgan was talking about with having volunteers, I've been a volunteer after I ran my own campaign 10 years ago. I've volunteered ever since, and it's really great to push the candidate and just see the excitement. We knocked on 100 doors.
Help them figure out, what message, what piece of literature they put out and stuff. So it can be a lot of fun. You meet, actually, I put 2 people on my volunteers together, and they got married. So.
Wow, nice. But the other
and
thing
they now have a baby. So good things happen in campaigns. But all right, so let's talk to anybody who wants to volunteer or to be a candidate. What do? They come and they contact you, but what's the flow?
Yeah, so the flow is that they need to learn what the candidate needs to know about running for office and what it takes to run for office. And
when do they have to make the decision?
The decision to run has to be made the last Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of June is when the declaration period is for your candidacy, which would normally be.
So they put in the declaration of candidacy at their town hall.
That's it. And you put the declaration of candidacy and you say, I'm running for this office with this party. Here's my address. I'm a qualified voter in this district. And you are.
And that just brings up something. Make sure you're a registered voter.
Absolutely, yes.
And that you are, you're a Republican or an independent before you.
That's
it's like
right.
60 or 90 days before. 90 days before.
90 days before declaration. So you have to make sure that you're registered and check with your local town hall. In fact, you just go to your website or the Secretary of State's website and check just by putting your date of birth and your name in, and it'll tell you what precinct you're in, and just to make sure that you're all set with that. So yeah, that's.
So in June, declaration of candidacy. Then what happens?
Declaration of candidacy. Then you get your nomination papers, and you actually need to just get, I believe it's 50 signatures for representative and 50 signatures.
50 valid signatures.
Valid signatures. And all that means are registered voters, not registered Republicans or registered unaffiliated. It's registered voters. And that starts your campaign because you're walking door to door so that you can become nominated to get on the ballot, but you're also going to be introducing yourself. It's a good start, but you need that, so you want to get probably double that to make sure in case someone is not registered or somehow fell off of the voting tallies.
That's right. And so then you're off to the races once they accept you.
That's right.
And then what does the party do? I mean, you need signs, you need walking brochures.
So we'd love you to contact us, a contact Rep Morgan.
We have volunteers who do design work, right?
All kinds of work, and we would like you to start taking these classes, these campaign classes, free at the RIGOP, to teach you to prepare yourself so that you're not scrambling in July to say, okay, what do I do next? And basically, we're going to introduce you to graphic designers. We're going to tell you how to file your campaign finance reports with help with that CF1, CF2, CF3. These forms are super easy. They're easy. They're real easy to form. There's some rules that have to be followed. You have to file an ethics form with the State Ethics Commission. But these are the type of things that we're going to walk you through, and hopefully, that doesn't deter people because it's a really simple thing. They're not looking into your whole life history. They just want to know what associations you have so that there are no conflicts of interest. And so once we do that, now it's off to the races. It's getting your palm cards printed, getting your lawn signs ready to go, talking about your campaign message. We're going to have people come to the RIGOP headquarters to talk about these things. 6 people
just to get you comfortable so that it is a little daunting. I'll be honest with you. I've done it. Now I'm an expert at going door to door. But in the beginning, you're saying, "Oh, geez, how do you do this?" Don't worry. We'll make you comfortable. You'll be fine. You'll be ready to go.
So one other thing I just want to talk about is that the RIGOP does offer assistance in that regard. So you're going to get a voting list. You're going to have all the registered voters in your district, and that's something that
you said on laptops.
On laptops, right? So the Secretary of State or the Board of Canvassers will give you that. But instead of you having to sort through, okay, which door should I knock on, or should I just knock on all of them? You're going to know whose door you're knocking on. You're going to know their voting tendencies. You're going to know whether they vote in the first place, because you want to make the best use of your time if you're going to walk for 3 or 4 hours a night. And not that you need to walk 3 or 4 hours every night, but we want you to walk as much as possible.
You have to walk a lot.
A lot. And so get a lot of pairs of sneakers.
Any of you who are out of shape, it's a great way to lose weight.
That's right.
And get your health up.
And so we have the walk application. It's going to be either on a tablet or a cell phone. And basically when you walk to someone's door, you can put data and say, I walked to Mr. Smith's door. Mr. Smith is very interested, and the only thing he really cares about is making sure that that the taxes are not going to be raised in this area. You know what Mr. Smith is interested in, or Mr. Jones is interested in the toll issue, and they want to know more about the toll issue.
So that you can follow up with them.
That's right.
And listen, we're getting to the end of our time here.
It's too much to say.
The point is, there's a lot of people who will support you. So I hope you'll really consider being a candidate. and helping us take back Rhode Island, because right now I just sometimes feel so discouraged that we're not being listened to, right? It's time for average Rhode Islanders to be listened to and for this government to be working for their best interests. So this gentleman right here will help you. I'll help you. There's a lot of folks who are there ready.
Willing and able. Step up. Join the fight. Please.
All right. Replace and repeal.
That's right.
The Projo ran an article written by Anthony Kim on Tuesday, February 11th of this year. The headline read, quote, "America's Declining Economic Freedom," unquote. Now, I got into it and then checked out the references that he cited to get more background. Seems we have lost economic freedom in 8 of the last 9 years, ranking us now 11th worldwide. This, according to the Heritage Foundation's 2016 Index of Economic Freedom. Since 2009, government spending has exploded to $29,867 per household, 2015 numbers. The national debt has risen to $125,000 for every tax-filing household in America, totaling $18 trillion. The Heritage Study includes 4 categories. They did rule of law, regulatory efficiency, limited government, and open markets. Within the rule of law world, they graded property rights at 80 out of 100, I guess, and freedom from corruption at 74. The comments were, "The American people's trust in government is the lowest it has been in the past 10 years. The limited government category graded government spending at 54.7-ish and fiscal freedom at 65.6. What's so bad is that the top income tax rate is 39.6%, with a corporate tax rate of 35, world's highest. When you do that, you drive new jobs to other, more competitive nations, so we have ended up with fewer jobs and lower American wages. The overall tax burden equals 25.4% of total domestic income. The open market groups are trade freedom at 87, investment freedom at 70, financial freedom at 70. Lastly, the regulatory efficiency grades were business freedom 84.7, labor freedom 91.4, and monetary freedom at 77. All just numbers. Put all these scores together, and we find ourselves falling to the 11th place in the world. Now, how can that be in the world's largest economy? The overall annual cost of meeting regulatory requirements has increased by over $80 billion since 2009, with more than 180 new regulations in place. That's nationally. Now, here in Rhode Island, we are great at passing new regulations. For instance, we rank 37th most burdensome in the category of licensing laws. Now, we average $164 in fees per license. If you want to be an HVAC contractor in Rhode Island, you need 5 years of experience, where most states require only 2.5. Then you need $111 a year to stay in business. Now, I really like this one. Rhode Island is only one of the 8 states to require truck drivers 1 year driver's license 1 year before the official licensure as a truck driver. This one is great. It takes only 37 days of training to become an EMT in Rhode Island, but you need 70 days to become a manicurist. No way. Rhode Island requires licenses for 49 out of the 102 moderate income occupations listed by the Institute of Justice. As I mentioned before, we are 37th most burdensome and 22nd most extensively and onerously, their word, licensed state. Now, I decided to see how ridiculous government regulators can be. Now, here's what I found online. Texas requires a new computer repair technician to obtain a private investigator's license. Means you can't fix computers unless you have a degree in criminal justice or have completed a 3-year apprenticeship with a licensed PI. Now, screw this up and it's a $4,000 fine and up to a year in jail. No way. The city of Philadelphia now requires all bloggers to purchase a $300 business privilege license. Louisiana says that a Buddhist monk must be fully licensed as a funeral director. and convert their monasteries into licensed funeral homes before they will be allowed to sell their handmade wooden caskets. In the District of Columbia, you need a license to give a tour of the nation's capital or 90 days in jail. In Lake Elmo, Minnesota, farmers can be fined $1,000 and be put in jail for 90 days for selling pumpkins or Christmas trees that are grown outside of the city limits. And finally, did you know that the 2,409-page healthcare reform bill will require all U.S. businesses to file millions more 1099s each year? Seems the average small business will now have to file 200 additional 1099s every year. Seems the government has hired an additional 2,000 new auditors to make sure all the 1099s are filed. I love it. Thank you for watching, and God bless.